Chapter 4: The Shift. Shifting implies no great move was made, only a small move rendering great results. We shift in our seats to be more comfortable. We shift gears in our cars to increase speed. Reaching our full potential is no different. Small changes can make a big difference. From my new position, I started to shift my thinking. Life was not as black and white as it once was. Things happened in the gray, and we don't always know why. I was careful to separate a person's talent from how they used it. I had athletic skills, but had allowed my talent to cultivate arrogance in my heart. My accident taught me how much more valuable talent becomes when the focus is to help others, not elevate oneself. Therein lies the shift. Keep the skill, adjust the motivation. I began to understand what God was doing and why I was still alive. I shifted from wanting to be relieved of this prison of a body to feeling as if I was truly free. My associations switched from jocks and cool kids to the marginalized and the bullied, from the tall and strong to the physically and emotionally broken. I shifted from trying to comfort myself to searching out how I could comfort others. Before the shift, I would walk through a room and expect if anybody was looking at me, it was because I was good looking. I had it bad. After the shift, my posture changed. I began to identify with those who were picked on for the wrong reasons. One-legged, overweight, redhead, nerdy, black, Indian, or whatever physical attributes the ill-willed have historically marginalized. People of color increasingly became the center of my focus. In many places, those with dark skin have been looked down upon and mistreated forever. Suddenly, it bothered me more than it would have in the past. My heart was filled with emotions for groups living in an environment of injustice. God was preparing me. Then he sent me to Alaska. It was cold there, and I'm not talking about the weather. I was the new kid once again. I was the crippled boy. At school, questions persisted. Kids would ask, "How do you put your backpack on? Can you hold a pencil well enough to write?" I never asked for help. I didn't want any help. My goal was to blend in as much as possible and to not be a burden. Fake it until you make it was my motto. Or in my case, talk till you can walk. Just as I was getting my sea legs in Tennessee, I had to adapt quickly to a new environment. To keep the new classmates from staring too much, I would wear 2 t-shirts under my t-shirt to provide some level of covering and to hide the subluxation in my shoulder. In other words, I didn't want to look as bony as I really was. Didn't matter though. People could not help but stare and make comments about my skeletal frame. Still today, I wear 3 t-shirts at once. It's more for comfort now, but back then, I didn't want to freak anybody out more than they already were by seeing me. My freshman year was spent figuring out how to cover what brought me the most ridicule. My goal was to avoid any additional hurt and pain, and as I knew, being a freshman already carries a certain level of offense. You can probably guess what's next. My father's job had us move again, this time to Texas for my sophomore year. I had gathered thick skin from Tennessee and Alaska by observing the meanness of human beings and getting picked on. Because of my physical frame and tattered clothes, I would hear people yell in the hallways when I shuffled by. "Oh, gross! Look at that kid! Look at his shoulders! Are you serious? You got no money?" You name it. I heard it. Kids are brutal. We had to take showers in gym class, and I refused. There was no way I was standing nude in a group of kids. I would rather smell bad all day. Anytime there was a swim party or any event where I would be exposed, I would do everything I could to avoid it. One time, our youth group had a swim party, and I knew my dad was going to make me go. He thought people didn't really care, but they did. I was working at Subway at the time, so I begged my boss for more hours. I told him he didn't even have to pay me as long as I could tell my parents I was on the clock. As time went by, I got better at covering things up. I had regained more mobility, so I was getting stronger too. I was also pretty good at finding ways to mask my weaknesses. I recovered some dignity by wearing those extra shirts to give myself size where there was none. And while nothing is wrong with wanting to look your best, I was always sensitive to the importance of being more authentic in every area of my life. Humility is a tremendous gift. I am not naturally inclined toward humility, says the crippled guy. If I'm honest, I still must remind myself even now to remain where God would have me. Pride is a thorn in my flesh. Being reminded daily of who I am keeps me grounded, and nothing reminds me like getting out of the shower and seeing physical remnants of who I used to be. None of us manufacture our capacity to breathe. Everything is a gift. We can steward these gifts, refine them, or allow them to decay. I needed no more lessons. I knew I was dependent on God and God alone. In Texas, I cultivated a certain hatred. I hated lunch. Not the food, but the school lunchroom. I hated walking in and seeing hundreds of kids laughing and talking with each other. There was a camaraderie, a tangible acceptance, but there was no table where former star athletes who were now crippled could sit. There was no table for me. I didn't have a group. I wasn't smart enough to sit with the nerds. I was definitely not athletic enough or cool enough to be with the athletes. And the worst thing of all was I had to carry a lunch tray. In my mind, the lunch tray drama was almost enough to make me want to drop out of school. I couldn't carry one. It would have been great to have had my own lunchbox with some Cheetos and a Capri Sun or even a bologna sandwich and chips. I could have gone off into a corner somewhere in a shadow and ate in peace without the possibility of embarrassment. But I was on the school lunch program, so the cafeteria was the only way I could eat. It was an ordeal every single day. First, I would have to find a place to sit, hopefully as close to the lunch line as possible. Distance was key. I would leave something on the table so I could see the goal, then hold my breath. Making it to the table was an Olympic feat. Doing it where people wouldn't see me straining was even harder. Dropping it would be a disaster. Dropping the tray simply could not happen. It could not happen. I had to do everything in my power to get back to the table uninterrupted as fast as I could. My arms were so weak, I only had seconds between the time I picked up the tray and the time it would hit the floor. All I could imagine was me, the tribeless kid who looked like a skeleton, spilling food all over the floor. It seemed as soon as I grabbed my tray, the whole lunchroom would stop and stare. They were probably thinking, "Look at this fool. Look at this idiot." But there were a few kids who never made fun of me. While others pointed at my struggle to get my food to a table, there was a group of black guys who didn't laugh. Pomac, Latavian, and Charles. They were studs. They looked like Greek gods, and for some reason, they wouldn't laugh. "Hey man, come sit with us," Charles yelled one day. I scooted and fumbled my way to his table. "Sup, man?" he asked. I didn't know how to respond. I could not believe someone like him was talking to someone like me. "Nothing much," I answered. "Cool," Charles said. "From now on, you sit with us." This meant so much. When I think about it, even these many years later, it brings me to tears. They treated me with decency, giving the nobody a place. I became the white kid at the black table. For context, 33% of the school was white, 33% was black, and 33% was Latino. Pretty crazy when you think about it. This was the late 90s. People stayed in their groups. It wasn't forced, it was just what people did naturally. At first, I didn't have a group, but Charles and his crew made me part of theirs. Some of the other black kids didn't like this too much, but whenever they would say stuff, Charles would let them know. "That's my kinfolk," he would say. "Don't mess with my kinfolk." Problem averted. He was the unofficial authority. I never could articulate how this made me feel. I felt as if I belonged. And this was part of the country with some of the worst racism you will ever see. We were in East Texas, not too far from a town considered to be the Ku Klux Klan capital. Races don't mix there. "Don't mess with Micah" was the word on the street. Because of this, life got better. I felt something come back. I can only assume the advice given by my father helped foster my new friendships. He always said, if a man wants to have friends, he must be friendly. So I maintained a posture of being kind to everyone, and I always said hello whether I got one back or not. Maybe I greeted Charles some day earlier. I don't know. All I know is a bond was created at the lunch table, and from that point forward, we were brothers. Something to think about. When we receive a gift, we are unsettled until we know the sender. The sender determines whether we enjoy the gift, report it to authorities, or throw the gift away. When presented with difficulties in life, when sickness, injury, or pain arrives at our front door, seek to know the sender. If it arrived on earth, it was mailed from heaven. Concentrate less on who delivered the dish, focus on who ordered the meal.